I worked in fashion, and I know I wanted to work in culture. I had an academic background in history and culture, but in the United States, it's a job that's quite difficult to get into. And so coming back to Thailand was almost a way of getting to know myself. Thai history goes back 1,000 years or more. And so how do you go through all this information that you can't read because I couldn't read Thai? And so a lot of times I got my information from conversation and storytelling. This is something that made a big impact on me, was storytelling and talking and having conversation.
Thanphuying Sirikitiya Jensen describes herself as curatorial by nature, where she focuses on the interpretation of historical spaces and topics, creating interactive exhibitions to help people connect with the traces of history and culture. Two of her most successful exhibitions were Wang Na Naramit and 100 Years Between. The starting point of her journey was when her team at the Fine Arts Department took her to the National Museum. When she asked for details, however, no one could explain the story behind it nor its significance to Thai history.
And when I asked people what it was, they said it was a museum. Most people had no idea that it was a big palace. In fact, one of the biggest things that got me into it was there's so little information on the palace itself. This is something that I thought about carefully, how can people not know the importance of this space or feel connected to it? So this was something that I began to see that was the biggest gap. Not necessarily even the information, but it was the fact that people didn't really feel connected to the site.
Apart from the lack of emotional connection to history among many Thais, the biggest challenge to her mission is the people's mindset. As she explains, most people believe that history and the contemporary world are separate rather than being socially integrated.
The difficulty is helping people understand that this is something that they can get involved with. And this is why I think it's really important when you work in culture that you need to create these platforms or rethink how we curate exhibitions or how we distribute information so that it's something that's not just information, but people can feel that they're part of it, which involves they need to create.
Growing up and living in the United States for 30 years, Thanphuying Sirikitiya not only wanted to pursue a career in arts and culture, but she felt that something was missing from her life. She then returned to Thailand to follow her desire to reconnect with her roots. But the biggest difficulty for her at the time was the Thai language, as she hadn't spoken Thai for many years. Therefore, she spent most of her time listening to stories for a year until she felt she understood enough.
And this is when I realized how important culture was. And it's something that people leave behind a lot because it's someone's identity. Your identity is connected to who you are. And when you feel like there's something that you don't understand or something that's stifled or something that's erased, you feel like something's missing. I think the difficulty in the beginning was that I felt sad. I felt sad that how can I feel disconnected from something that was half of me?
As the youngest daughter of Her Royal Highness Princess Ubonrat Ratchakanya, she admits that she wasn't used to people knowing everything she did, as she describes herself as a very sensitive and private person. Thanphuying Sirikitiya also revealed that people felt the pressure to not approach her at the beginning because of her partially royal status. Because of this, however, many of the senior officials were willing to listen to her ideas.
Maybe at my age in Thai government or in Thailand in general, it's quite difficult to push boundaries or to go beyond a certain point and get your voice out there because of age and how old you are. But I think that I used the opportunity that I saw a lot of people all the time, and that Puyai and adults listen to me sometimes just by virtue, by my, luxury of who just by my privilege, I have to say. I used it as an opportunity to try to push a bit of boundaries and try to say hey, can we try this? The best advice is don't be afraid. Don't apologize. Think heavily. You're the only one that knows what's right for you. And as a woman, especially if you're in a public position, there are going to be people who don't like what you do, and there are going to be people that like it, and it's something that comes with it, and you have to be strong with it. So this is the advice I would give people, really, like, be strong with your convictions, but be thoughtful about it. And also, like, yeah, the last thing, which is something that took me years to learn, because I am unapologetic, and this is something that's so important in Thailand, which is kindness and empathy. It's one of those things that I learned that I started to be much more successful once I was patient and once I met people where they were.